lying flat. She's certainly not sitting upright in the birth stool any longer. And of course from here, the rot set in, if you like, and we started lying flat on our backs in beds. The warming pan was yet another ordinary part of aristocratic domestic life. Servants filled these with coals and placed them between the sheets. Now the significance of this is that childbirth was a spectator sport because for royalty there couldn't be a possibility of a strangeling being smuggled in the warming pan. And you can see all and sundry were invited into the birth room. For centuries this happened. In fact, it's only very recently that we haven't had strangers in the royal birth room to attest to the pedigree of the baby. This, the first chambermaid to Marie Antoinette wrote about this scene. Finally, before noon, it became certain that the birth was imminent. The etiquette allowing all persons indiscriminately to enter at the moment the delivery of a queen was observed, with such exaggeration that when the obstetrician said aloud, "The queen is giving birth," the persons who poured into the chamber were so numerous in the rush, it nearly killed the queen. And, right up until the birth of Princess Margaret, we've had the spectators, probably for the Queen, it was the Prime Minister, and for the Queen, for Princess Margaret, it was the Home Secretary. But it's only a very, very recent custom that has stopped, that there isn't this governmental person in the room to attest to the pedigree of the royal baby. Contrary to popular belief, Charles was not the first royal father to be present when his children were born. Albert, of course, was there when Queen Victoria gave birth. She adored Albert, and he was obviously a wonderful support for her. His presence in the delivery room, of course, was unusual for a member of the 19th century British aristocracy, and it was widely attributed to his German background. So on 2 occasions tonight, we've sort of blasted the Germans. However, they were all Germans. William and Harry's birth was completely uneventful. Princess Di, in fact, wanted to have her babies at Buckingham Palace, but the royal physician, George Pinker, advised her against that, so she gave birth in hospital. She took no drugs. She sucked on an ice cube to prevent dehydration, and she basically gave birth. It seemed that she had about a 3-hour labour for Harry and a little bit longer for William. So that really ends my talk. And I guess all I really want to say here is welcome, Royal Babe. There are no decisions to be made about elective caesareans or not. The best position would be, in fact, to give birth at home, and we know that Kate is possibly going to go to St Mary's, I think, and that she has been having antenatal care and she does have a midwife. So we hope that all will be well and the royal tradition will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally, for a deeply researched and very entertaining historical evaluation. I might actually just ask both Peter and Sally to come back up, or just throw it open to any questions. You've probably got 10 or 15 minutes for any questions. And I would hope that there'd been some stimulation, or if there are some opinions or thoughts. Anybody, anything they'd like to ask? Yes?
Do obstetricians these days agree to elective caesareans at maternity births?
Some obstetricians do, is the short answer. Some cheat. Well, when the New South Wales Health came out and said we couldn't do it, so it was sort of a big public outcry, probably about 5 or 10 years ago, something like that. And it was like in the lay press to say that you couldn't have a caesarean section by choice. So typically, which is what people do, is they juggle the stories to make it work. So then you would actually find, gosh, their blood pressure's a bit up, you better have a caesarean section for hypertension return. So you would create a medical excuse so that you would then tick in the letter of the law. But still today, even, and certainly in the public sector, in the private sector more than the public sector, some obstetrician will offer elective caesarean sections of choice. As a side anecdote with one of my colleagues, who shall remain nameless, I had this debate probably must be 10 or 15 years ago, and he was offering patient choice caesarean section at that stage. And I said to him, but how awful, you might actually end up with a major complication and like clot or something like that. And he said, well, actually, funny you should say that. Well, not funny, but interesting you should say that. A couple of weeks ago, he'd done elective caesarean section, the woman was going in the lift 3 days after the caesarean section and dropped dead from a massive pulmonary embolus, and the woman died. And I said, well, surely that's changed your practice and you wouldn't do it again then. And he said, no, it's so rare, it only happened to me once. Which wasn't quite the statistical way to approach it, but one of our colleagues actually, that was his response. So I think there is a bit of non-thinking going on perhaps, and unfortunately I'm probably on the wrong side. Yeah, I'm on your side. So, yeah, I think that elective caesarean section is practice though, and whether it should or shouldn't be is still open for debate. If the woman chooses, that's the problem we have to face up to. But yes, you can get this otherwise.
There's
Yeah, you can put one into it.
So I can put one in, yeah. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to.
Well, I think we can, Tracy.
There's an interesting conflict there, isn't there? Because we believe very strongly in informed choice. Very much so. It's all about informing and allowing people to choose. But we then inherently come from a particular perspective that recognises or feels that a certain choice is therefore the right one to make. So it can be quite confrontational if you see somebody who really has researched, has all the information, feels that they've made a completely informed choice, but it goes against what you think the informed choice would be. So if you are presented with somebody who has read all the literature they can find, has sought out multiple opinions, is highly informed, and then says, okay, thanks, as a response to that, I'll choose to have a caesarean. I find it's just an interesting situation because they've made what we think they should do, which is an informed choice, but we feel they've got it wrong. I think that's interesting. There's another question just behind.
Yes, in regards to the tradition of, we do know that there has been a royal birth given and performed at the palace. If Kate managed to want to stay at home and there was then the need for a caesarean section, and by now every paparazzi in the world is out the front and blocking traffic, would the obstetrician consider the emergency caesarean section at the palace today?
Gosh, we're pretty well versed in this. I mean, so, I don't know all the details. My detail, I did see on the news that she was going to go to St Mary's, so in fact I think that was what I thought was going to be the case. I also heard on the news that she wants to have an all delivery, sort of ruined my whole argument because the choice that she wanted it. But look, I'd have a crack in the kitchen if I was here. I mean, I've often offered at barbecues to deliver babies with a set of salad servers and some mayonnaise, so I think I could probably do it.
A whimsical comment and then a real sort of statistical one. The whimsical male comment, if it was men having babies, do you think we'd actually consent to being awake and having a major abdominal operation? I wouldn't. That's not whimsical, being gutless male. But, and then the real statistical one, the sad late passing of David Henderson Smart, an unpublished study looking at a collective admission rate of 2 years of babies admitted to newborn intensive care across Australia, showing that in fact elective caesareans led to the 2% death rate of those babies that had respiratory distress with absolutely no medical indication of elective caesarean. So I suspect, I mean I'm showing my bias as a neonatologist, but it is not a benign condition for the baby, and I think Nick's sort of proposition that a low stress response, a low cortisol, stress is good. Stress is good for the baby. And I personally don't believe that a no indication elective caesarean should be contemplated.
I think the value of your comment is quite important there. Stress, if you see it in the Women's Weekly, is definitely something to be avoided. Stress, as we are clinicians, midwifery and medical, is often a good thing. And this is the irony that we're trying to say the same word has enormously different meanings for different people. So if you went out to the community and said we like our babies to be stressed, and you're a psychologist, opera be in there and we're in real trouble. So I think that's the issue, is that it's this interpretation stuff that we get talked on every time.
Just an economic question. If we have women, we can see that women have got choices, that they can choose no medical complications to have caesarean section that can be achieved. That for most elective surgery, it's not life-saving.
I think where we go now. That's the last question. We've run out of money. We take it for like $4.
For plastic surgery, women are, it's not for medical, but we don't cover that with Medicare. So should we not cover that with public first, elective caesarean, or on maternal request? What do you think?
I'd go further and I'd totally uncover IVF. I think that's probably spending more money than elective caesarean sections. And I think if we're going into political debate, certainly that's the case. Or if we were going to cover IVF, perhaps we should ask the parents not just to pay for the IVF, but to pay for the billions of dollars of neonatal complications because they put two babies in. I think there's a lot of medical macroeconomics to look at there, and I think we can probably make such an argument. It's a valid point. You choose it, you pay for it. Yeah.
Terry?
Can I explore concepts of pain?
Pain or pain?
Pain, not pain.
I'm not sure about pain. I'm about pain.
In that, as a primary care person, when I see a woman who comes in and requests to be referred to a doctor who won't argue about the concept of an elective caesarean section, and they do, they want to cut through that stuff and just get, they want to be referred to someone who won't argue with them, especially in the eastern suburbs.
That's what you have. Not North Shore.
But the thing they always bring up is pain, and I wonder if we're getting more cosseted, getting more squeamish, unprepared to accept pain under any circumstances. And I think some of the stories that people tell, I think some of the I'm thinking the other day, it makes it hard to inform logically. I put an implant on in someone the other day who was terrified of needles and yet had about 25 piercings. I couldn't work it out.
Can I just give you one of those? I just did it was a repeat caesarean section on a woman who'd had a traumatic previous caesarean section with, and it wasn't my patient, it was a public patient, with an epidural block. And she demanded a general anaesthetic for her elective caesarean section. We went to do the catheter to find she had 2 piercings of her labia. So she's quite happy for someone to just stick a couple of rings in a labia, one assumes with no anaesthetic, but not to have a caesarean section of an epidural block. Yeah, pain is a problem. And another anecdote, as I was on the other night at North Shore, 2 women came in on a Friday night to ED at North Shore, and both of them had 10 out of 10 pain. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't had 10 out of 10 pain yet. I'm waiting for it. And I've had some major surgery and I've broken bones, but I wouldn't ever say I've had 10 out of 10 pain. So I think conceptually, I think pain is an issue for the generation that we're going to deal with in the next 15, 20 years on the basis.
Sorry, just one tiny comment. Very interestingly, when you go on the calm birth weekend with Peter Jackson, first thing he does on Saturday, because my wife and I went on that course, and the Saturday morning he goes around the room and says to everybody, what are you anticipating about labour? And it's pain, 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 pain. 100% of people. That's what society, community says, labour, pain. That's what we think of first.
That biblical stuff coming out again, you say.
Sally, you're around to
Oh, no, it's all right.
Oh.
There's another question.
Sorry.
It's not
Yes.
so much pain, but having spent mind-numbing hours sewing up the vaginal tears that happen when people deliver, I wonder what are the statistics with regards to perineal tears and, subsequent prolapses, incontinence, etc., etc.
It's very low after caesarean section.
Sorry.
We need the other speaker for that.
Not completely without them.
No, absolutely, that's the point, which is what I guess what we were pointing out,
But
that pregnancies.
what are the statistics for vaginal delivery?
Well, I guess the small ends, as I say, we've mentioned in the talk, there are billions of papers written on this whole subject, but it's a graded exercise. Pregnancy is bad for you, labour is worse for you, and having a baby is worse. But women can actually have a labour with a caesarean section, or even labour without a caesarean section, and still have perineal trauma associated with just being pregnant. So it's not entirely the birthing process that destroys the perineum.
Can I say something on that too? In that I don't think we manage pain well after labour. We send them off 2 days later with a couple of Panadol. I think that's outrageous. I'd be giving them everything that I could, but they get sent home with very little.
And I think if you've got a traumatised perineum and it's really uncomfortable, I suspect that may lead to quite a lot of problems down the track.
I've actually done research on that.
Here's one I've
Well,
recommended.
actually, women won't have much pain after 24 hours. Even if it's developed, then they won't take it.
Well, Queen Victoria had the
There you go.
solution, of course. She took cannabis.
She did.
We're not advocating that, guys.
Yeah, this is an ACPS
Yeah.
endorsement, but
Getting that on prescription might be a challenge.
That's where his 14-year-old son comes
Yeah,
in.
exactly. We know the one to go to.
unless there are any major burning questions, I might draw things to a close. Can you just join me again in thanking speakers for their presentations? A collaborative handshake, but I think, you know, most importantly, for clearly putting a lot of time and effort into talking this evening and their research, which we really appreciate. One of the most important things about these ACPS get-togethers is that we've got wine, we've got some thoughts afterwards. And it's as much about getting people to have a chance to talk about perinatal issues. So please do, if you can, stay and you'll have a chat. And also, if any of you haven't joined ACPS or haven't Facebooked us and become our friends, have a look. And if you think you're interested, please do join us. Thank you, and thank you all for coming.